if you look at the history of treatment and recovery, both, in recovery mutual aid fellowships and their history, there is a natural tendency out of profound gratitude to want to take one's personal story and whatever benefited that story and basically impose that on everybody else as sort of the way to recover. And particularly in early stages of recovery. In later stages of recovery, we begin to get greater humility and greater tolerance. So we get the Bill Wilson who can say, pretty well into his recovery, the roads to recovery are many. But I doubt that he said that in the first 12 months out of Towns Hospital. And the same would be true for others who've gone through religious or secular recovery mutual aid fellowships and structures. And in the same way with treatment, what we've tended to do in treatment, very different than primary medicine, is we've had treatments organized into silos where treatment organizations provide one approach. And they've organized themselves around that. Whereas in medicine, what we have is if I come and I'm assessed for cancer or hypertension or asthma or any of the other complex disorders, what I'm going to find is a large menu of treatment options provided by the same organization. It's only recently we've begun to migrate towards that direction within the addiction field and move out of these competing silos, each promising that they had the way to be treated. And of course, all the financial interest tied into that claim. We're finally seeing a softening between abstinence-based versus medication-assisted treatment. We're beginning to get a softening between secular, religious, and spiritual approaches to treatment, with the idea of I think it's coming out of the recovery advocacy movement. I think the central claim of that movement is that there are multiple pathways of recovery and all are cause for celebration. There's a tolerance within that movement to begin to, when you move out of the silo, what's changing attitudes is really encountering people personally who are in quality recovery in a pathway different than our own. That seems to be the transformative moment. People think their way through, for example. I changed my attitudes towards medication intellectually long before I changed those attitudes in my belly. And what changed my belly as opposed to my thinking was really meeting people in long-term medication-assisted recovery, who I had great respect for in terms of the quality of their lives and the quality of their character. And until I met those individuals, I could sort of begrudgingly admit that there might be some people for whom medication was valuable. But when I met those individuals, it was a very different experience for me in terms of really needing to sort of push the boundaries of my tolerance and understanding in a way that I hadn't really before. For me, I think the real frontier is, how do we begin to uniquely combine and sequence elements in ways that we've never put together before? For example, we've had the arguments between the abstinence-based recovery community and the medication-assisted recovery community. But the question is, are there individuals who are not in recovery in either world who could be in recovery today if we found a way to combine both of those worlds, of bringing the best of medication-assisted support for recovery and also all of the psychosocial and spiritual supports that we found in the traditional abstinence-based community? So I think the idea of combining, I think of it as I think we're on the brink of developing in the addictions world what the AIDS cocktail became in terms of altering the fundamental trajectory of that disorder within the AIDS epidemic. And they did it not by a new single intervention, but by this idea, when you combine things, you can get outcomes dramatically beyond what you could have predicted from the effects of individual interventions. Somebody in the late 1990s would have told me that in the rest of my lifetime, I would see recovering people and their families and allies marching publicly as far as the eyes could see. That would have been unthinkable to me. And yet, we're seeing, recovery marches with 20 and 30,000 people, and the first national recovery march will be this coming October in Washington, D.C. So the idea of that kind of mobilization that's parallel to what happened in response to the AIDS epidemic, I think we're actually experiencing now for the first time in such a dramatic way.